Dial 888-441-4623. It's a flagrant foul if you're driving. Be safe, basketball fans. 844-416-8123. There's more to this game than just the score. So let's go inside the paint with two of the best in the business, Ethan Skolnick and Ira Winderman.
All right, welcome in to the latest episode of Inside the Paint. This is Ethan Skolnick. You used to hear me here on the 5 Reasons Sports Hour. Thanks to Kai for letting us sit in today. Although, actually, he just said he wanted the extra hour's sleep, so it worked out for him, too. Again, I'm Ethan Skolnick. I'm joined here on the phone by Ira Winderman. You can follow him at Ira Heatbeat. Usually we're in here at 10:30 on Thursdays. This one's a little bit more important, though, so we're starting a little bit earlier. And, of course, as soon as we get off the air at 11:01, something will happen because that's how this plays out. But, Ira, let's just start here. And, again, you can find let's start here. Obviously, everybody's talking about Kyle Lowry. We've known for a long time that the Heat would have interest in Kyle Lowry. We know the relationship with Jimmy. We know that this relationship is sort of developed with Bam. We also know that with this team struggling, that they're trying to find the right pieces to put around Bam and Jimmy for the near term and for the long term. But did you think that we would be in this spot with this team, with everything was talked about for 2021, where basically the Heat are considering locking themselves in to a certain degree to a quote-unquote big three of Jimmy, Bam, and a guy who's turning 35 years old today?
Oh, my answer to that would be yes and no. My answer would be no because remember, Ethan, we started the season that Bradley Beal was going to be that third wheel, and then things changed off of that. Then we started the season thinking that maybe Victor Oladipo would be that third wheel, and then all of a sudden he wasn't on the Pacers. So, one, I think it shows you how everything evolves over the course of the season. And a matter of fact, I'm going to take it back a step further because let's be honest. This whole thing started that the third wheel was going to be Giannis Antetokounmpo, right? The entire offseason, every single thing the Heat did was to base their future built around the fact that, one, they would have ample salary cap space. 2, Bam Adebayo would not be extended to the offseason. 3, Giannis Antetokounmpo would not sign his extension and would be a free agent on the 2021 market. So that just shows you how everything evolves. I think once that dramatic change happened, everything changed. And that was evidence and sort of crystallized when we saw Jay Crowder come in with the Suns on Tuesday night, that if the Heat basically knew then what they know now, Jay Crowder would have been playing for the Heat on Tuesday night. It wouldn't have been about 2021 cap space. So it just shows you how there's these constant sort of, I don't know if I want to say roadblocks or maybe just speed bumps along the way. And I think the one thing the Heat have been very, very good about is adjusting on the fly, is whether going back to Alonzo's kidney illness and how they had to rebuild that team, going back to, honestly, preparing for LeBron by going through 2 years just in the absolute darkness, and then building back from when LeBron left. So I think the Heat are smart enough to realize that there were going to be speed bumps along the way, and I think that's what's led us now to this moment of Kyle Lowry. Pat Riley always has a plan C, D, E, F, G, all the way out to Z. It's like naming the hurricanes. He'll go to the Greek letters if he has to. So I think that's where Kyle Lowry comes from. This is not what the Heat wanted. They wanted a big three with Giannis Antetokounmpo. This is not what the Heat preferred. They preferred Bradley Beal being the mega scorer for the team that can't score. But at this moment, this is what they're left with.
Yeah, and Andy's the one at the Hurricane Center trying to coordinate all this stuff that Pat throws at him, and he's got to do it at the last minute. And It's interesting when you talk about the plan. It is. They always talk about the plan after the plan after the plan, right? And you can go back even further. I mean, when the proctologist, had to take that 10-foot pole out of Pat Riley's, we know that quote because Juwan Howard was taken away. There was an immediate pivot to Dan Marley, and that ended up becoming kind of a piece on that team. We talk about the 2000 pursuit of Grant Hill and Tracy McGrady, which had Pat Riley up in Orlando trying to get Tracy to come. That doesn't end up working out, so it's Eddie Jones and Anthony Mason and Brian Grant. And so you're right, there has always been this – even 16, when Dwayne left, if you remember – literally, like within 12 hours, they had acquired 6 players that were on the list to get. So I always try to make that clear to Heat fans that these things are so fluid, in part because the Heat are working so many things at once. And that's what I want to get to here.
Actually, I want to interrupt for a second, so I apologize, because I think it's another important factor here, very important factor. And you know this, Ethan, because you've been around the team so much. The Heat absolutely hate the notion that they've lost out on these players, that there was a chance and that they blew it. And you know this, when they didn't get Durant, when the Hamptons 5 from the Warriors went up there. Remember that the backlash, that was the summer, they didn't get Durant, they were planning for this. You remember the Gordon Hayward year, when he came here and after he has his visit, his agent Mark Bartelstein and Gordon Hayward said it was a fantastic visit, and there was the thought they were going to get him. So I think, and this is really important today, Ethan, and you've mentioned it in your other outlets also. You talk about everyone to everyone. That's what you're supposed to do. And I've heard you in your other outlets also hedge it this way. It doesn't mean this wasn't talked about. It doesn't mean the Heat didn't try. It's just that these things don't always get done. So I think it's really important at the end of today, if the Heat don't wind up with Kyle Lowry or don't wind up with Victor Oladipo, it's not a failure, because I would rather my team be in the game and be aggressively trying for upgrades rather than my team being a sideline team that's parked there because they're paralyzed by fear of taking a risk.
No, you're absolutely right, and it's funny you mentioned Bartelstein because I feel like he's always involved. The Heat have done so much business with Mark over the years; it's crazy. Whether players they've gotten or players that they haven't gotten. So let's get to the Lowry thing, because as we talk about, having all these plans in the air, I feel like some of what has gotten out here publicly, which we know typically the Heat don't like this stuff getting out, but there's just no way around it now. But some of it actually does work somewhat to their advantage because, for instance, you're going after Lowry. We all know that Kyle has to first he had to decide he wanted to leave. It seems like that's happened. Then it's got to be a place he wants to go. Obviously, the Heat are sort of in a final 2 or 3 on that if they're not number 1. And then Masai Ujiri of Toronto has to basically agree to whatever compensation comes back, and likely 3rd or 4th teams have to be involved, okay? So all of that stuff needs to happen. But as you're doing that, it's interesting to me because if you look at Oladipo, who we mentioned earlier, it feels to me like a little bit of a message is being sent to Houston because everybody knows that Victor wants to be here after this season ends, and yet the Rockets' demands have been incredibly high from everything that I've heard. And if you're going after Kyle Lowry, you could get Houston to lower its demands ultimately. Is it possible we're talking Lowry and this day ends up with Oladipo?
I was telling people, and again, I'm sure we're going to run across our breaks here, so you tell me when I have to stop here for the first break. But here's what happened, and I know you've done some of your own reporting, as have I. So when the whole Kyle Lowry thing started and all of a sudden Tyler Hero's name came out, I was like, whoa. That's where I sort of draw the line at 21 versus Kyle Lowry today turns 35. And I made a call to someone involved in the negotiations, and they basically told me this. Toronto threw out the name Tyler Hero because they wanted the Sixers to up the ante, whether it was Tybalt, whether it was Maxey. So that's what happens. We all know this. Everyone who's inside the game knows that some outside party, third party, someone with an interest throws out someone that might not be involved at all. So I made this call, and I basically was told, no, Tyler Hero's not been offered. That's just their play to try to get Philadelphia to put in a little something more. And God bless the Raptors for doing that. You should do that. But that's a long-winded way of getting to this. If Tyler Hero is not involved in that, there could be a way, Ethan, where if the deal is constructed now, some form of Precious Achiuwa and Kelly Olynyk and Nunn or something else for Kyle Lowry, if that's enough, that all of a sudden Tyler Hero becomes involved possibly for Victor Oladipo. And while you might debate the merits of the two, at least there's an age marriage there that's a lot more palatable, that if you trade for Victor Oladipo, and you're hoping he's past his injuries, and let's face it, Tyler has had his injuries also,
yes.
that you're getting a younger player. So I do think there is a path. And again, we will know by 3 o'clock, and most things don't happen. Right. But if the aforementioned deal with Achiuwa and Olynyk and Nunn or something like that works for Lowry, All of a sudden, you have Hero available for Oladipo, and I think the Rockets would do that deal because we know they were interested when the Harden deal was available. So, and again, I'm pie in the skying because why not, in the morning of the trade deadline day, it's like Christmas when you don't know what's in those packages, so you might as well hope for the best, there is a possibility that the Miami Heat within 2 weeks or so could possibly field a lineup of Bam Adebayo, LaMarcus Aldridge, Jimmy Butler, Victor Oladipo, and Kyle Lowry. And while I'm not sure that's beating the Nets' big three, that's a hell of a lot different than what the Heat have featured in recent weeks amid some of these uneven times. So, yes, the Heat could go very big today. They do have the possibilities. And people stop getting caught up in draft choices for this reason.
Yeah.
When you acquire a draft choice, especially a 76ers draft choice in the 20s, you have no idea what you're going to get. It's an unknown. It's hard to get successful career NBA players in the 20s. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen. At least with the Precious Achiuwa, you know he's a tangible asset. He's not a flop. He might not be an NBA career starter, but he's a tangible and viable NBA player. Same thing with Tyler Hero. Honestly, Ethan, same thing with Duncan Robinson, same thing with Kendrick Nunn. So I think this whole thing of, we want to get picks you don't know what they're going to be. The Heat have tangible, young property available that would make your team better now and also present you with a future. I think this whole notion of the Heat lacking assets, I think the Heat actually have tangible assets. They don't have a player known as number 27 pick. They have a player known as, hey, Kendrick Nunn just scored 25 the other day.
And the other thing is a team like Toronto and Masai, they value being competitive. So it's not like he wants to build it all, they have good players there still. And so
right. And they have a core there, and you can plug and play some of these other guys. And here's the thing about both Nunn and I didn't mention Robinson, which I should have in the Lowry trade also.
Well, Windhorst is reporting he's in it, which is I've heard. Look, the thing is, I've heard so many different versions of that trade at this point from so many different people that I don't know if Duncan's in it or not at this stage.
But you know what, Ethan, the point I'm trying to make, let's say he is in it, and let's say even Kendrick is. The reason that works for the Raptors is this, and I think you'll agree with me. Free agents don't go to Toronto. We both agree on that. I'm not saying that's not right. I'm not saying that's not fair. I'm saying that's the reality. So if you start with that reality, when you get restricted free agents, all of a sudden they have their rights to match any outside offer. Restricted free agents are good for the Raptors. With Duncan Robinson and Kendrick Nunn, no matter what those players get on the market this summer, they then can go back and match those offers, so they really do become keepers.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, we got so much to get to after the break, but I got one question for you. Try to answer this one in 30 seconds.
Me?
This is the difficult one. I know. Just get it out. So here we go. We got 26 seconds left. Who has the most leverage? We know Kyle Lowry has the most leverage. Who has more leverage in this situation, Toronto or Miami?
I'm going to go party three. I'm going to go Philadelphia, because if they step in with Maxey or they step in with Tybal or step in with both, they get the deal done. So I think all of this hinges on the 76ers.
All right, that's interesting stuff. All right, we're going to be back on Inside the Paint. We could go another 2 hours today, but we're going to go at least another 45 minutes. I'll be back with Ira Winderman here on your home for local sports talk, OnsideRadio.com.
Onside Radio, the only choice for the South Florida sports fan.
I'm Ryan Seacrest. First responders are people who stand for a greater purpose. They will be there for you when nobody else is, to help you, your family, your community. This is their selfless promise. This is their sworn duty, to protect, to serve, to help. They put themselves in harm's way for us. They come to the rescue at times when we need them most. First responders are making enormous personal sacrifices to keep showing up for us and fighting the good fight. Nearly 70% of all firefighters are volunteers. That means when they get injured or quarantined, they may not have a way to pay their rent or keep their family safe and fed. No matter who you are or where you live, when you call 911 and ask for help, first responders show up. Now, let's show up for the people who show up for us every day and every night.
Go to firstrcf.org and make a difference today.
Hey everybody, it's Good Greek Moving and Storage, and for over 2 decades, they've been entrusted to handle all of your moving and storage needs. And now, Good Greek is the official mover of Inter Miami CF. And if Inter Miami trusts the good Greek, you should too. For the best move ever, whether it's across town or across the country, go to GreekMoving.com. That's GreekMoving.com for Good Greek Moving and Storage, the official movers of your Inter Miami CF.
Take Onside Radio everywhere you go with a Radio FM app. Download the free app and listen to your favorite OnsideRadio.com host. Go to your app store, download Radio FM, and search Onside Radio, South Florida's sports station.
For over 20 years, Mr. Glass has been committed to the safety and satisfaction of our clients. Our products are the culmination of innovative engineering, aesthetic appeal, and the highest levels of quality. Through our legacy, Mr. Glass strives to impart the true meaning of quality, service, and sustainability to new generations. Reputation, experience, and trust is why clients choose Mr. Glass. Live the future now. Locate a dealer near you today.
He has an overbite that makes him look like a cartoon character, a slightly crooked eye, and an uncommonly wrinkly neck. In the right light, he can look a little like a garden gnome, and he'll wear a bow tie just because. Sure, you might call him a little quirky, but that's exactly what makes him so perfect. Tuna is a 3-year-old Chihuahua Dachshund mix with more than 700,000 followers on Instagram, and it all started because he was adopted. You can't buy a best friend like Tuna, but you can adopt one. Help us save them all at bestfriends.org.
Time for the hardcore basketball talk you crave. OnsideRadio.com presents Inside the Paint with Ethan Skolnick and Ira Winderman. To reach out to the guys, dial 888-441-4623. It's a flagrant foul if you're driving. Be safe, basketball fans. 844-416-8123. That's 844-416-8123. There's more to this game than just the score. So let's go inside the paint with two of the best in the business, Ethan Skolnick and Ira Winderman.
All right, Ethan Skolnick back on OnsideRadio.com. We're in here for Kai until 11. Follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick at 5 Reasons Sports. Follow this guy at Ira Heatbeat on Twitter. Ira Winderman from the Sun Sentinel. Okay. The report's out there, and you and I, again, we're talking to a lot of different people, and sometimes information comes in that's conflicting.
Sure.
In some ways, people are hearing things third hand. Sometimes, as you know, and I try to explain to people, sometimes, someone has a reason for putting something out there that is not totally accurate, and they're kind of fishing with a reporter a little bit. And
Sure.
And so everything to this degree is fluid, but all of this stuff has kind of come back where most of the national guys now are reporting what the local guys have been reporting, and there is some consistency here. So let's get to this latest Brian Windhorst report. I know you and I both know Brian well.
Sure.
Brian obviously knows the Miami situation. Brian is reporting that Duncan Robinson is in the deal. Tyler Hero is not. I think that's consistent with both you and I have
Correct.
reported.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask the Duncan Robinson question here, because
Sure.
I feel like this is where the different philosophies inside the Heat organization, like everybody assumes they're monolithic, and they're not. Pat Riley may have a different view of how to build a team than maybe Eric Spoelstra would, who's developed some of these guys and is on the court with them every day. I'm not saying that doesn't mean there's friction. It means that there may be competing philosophies.
Absolutely.
Right, and Duncan Robinson is one of those guys that, to me, symbolizes that, because the way I can see Pat Riley viewing this is basically found money, okay, a guy who wasn't drafted, who, we didn't know what he was going to be. We put a little bit of work into him in time, our group, Simon and Spo and everybody else, and we found a guy who became a starter on a finals team, okay? Regardless of how he played, he was a starter on a finals team. But ultimately, it's found money, right? Like, he became a chip that we could move, just like Kendrick Nunn. Last day of the season, right? You give up Rodney McGruder, you pick up this guy that Golden State didn't elevate, and you found money, right? Second in Rookie of the Year voting. Whereas I could see Eric Spoelstra in particular, because I know he likes both guys, but in particular with Duncan Robinson, that this is a player that you value, that you want to keep, that you see as being important to the sets that you run. Have they made a decision, in your view, Ira, about paying Duncan Robinson or not? Because that is such a big part of this, because if you're not going to pay him anyway, then I don't mind giving him up in a deal for Kyle Lowry, because he wasn't going to be with you in the future regardless.
I mean, and this, Ethan, is where I think it is very important to have separation of powers, front office, and coaching. and I think this is where others have failed. Stan Van Gundy in Detroit comes up as a recent example, is there are conflicting desires. Eric Spoelstra has designed an offense that is built largely around the spacing created by Duncan Robinson. And everything he has done over the last 2 seasons is sort of predicated on, I have this one guy that everyone has to chase, and if they don't, I'm going to get a good three-point look. That's how the team is built. Pat Riley and Andy Ellisberg and Adam Simon are building a salary cap off of sound financial decisions that allow them to keep the money available for their whale or harpoon, whatever you want to call it. And here's the problem. Duncan Robinson, based off of last season's play and the play in the playoffs, is sort of in Joe Harris and Davis Bertans' area. Davis Bertans got a 5-year, $80 million contract this past offseason, and the Wizards have gone nowhere. Joe Harris got a 4-year, $75 million contract. So the question for the Heat is not only what Duncan Robinson is doing now for Eric Spoelstra, which is vital, but what happens going forward? And do you wind up having to make that difficult decision on a mostly one-dimensional player in the offseason? And so I think, Ethan, what we're seeing today and what we will see is a referendum on what the Heat are thinking about Duncan Robinson in the future. Yeah. Whether he's dealt or not today, if we find out that he very much was offered, and perhaps even offered in multiple deals, that'll tell us that the Heat have sort of drawn a line in the sand, that they are not going to make Duncan Robinson a $15 million player and might not even feel comfortable making him a $12 million player. So I think he should be made available, and I'll tell you why. If the Heat were contending for a championship right now, the Heat have always been this way. They are all in on the moment. How many times has Pat Riley told us that Mickey Arison is more than willing to spend into the luxury tax, well into the luxury tax, when they're in contention? But I think there sort of is a come to whatever you want to call it moment where you have to be honest with yourself as a front office. And I'll ask you this, Ethan. Ethan, are the Miami Heat a championship contender in 2021?
As currently constituted, no chance.
Right. And even if you were to add an Oladipo or a Lowry, you're still going against Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant, and that's got to sort of create a reality for you. So I think you almost, while you're not punting on the season at all, have to sort of protect your future, and more importantly, Ethan, think about your future. And that's why I think if you can get something of value for Duncan Robinson now, it makes sense, and that's why if the Kyle Lowry extension is, and it can't be formally done to the offseason, but we know the Heat with Shaq and Goran take care of that, is 2 years at $25 million, you can also look at it this way. Well, of that $25 million, or 2 years of $50 million, of that $25 million per season, 15 of it might have been taken by Duncan Robinson anyway.
And some of it by Kendrick Nunn, by the way, too, right?
Yeah,
so
same thing. I think Kendrick's more in mid-level money, so maybe $9-10 million. But you're right. So if you send the two of them out, that might have been $25 million annually you were going to spend anyway, and instead you get this proven player, even if it is for a rental of just 1 or 2 years. So I think Duncan Robinson very much is out there, and honestly, Ethan, I think he should be out there.
Well, and it's a similar calculation to the one they made with Justice, where it was essentially you're going to be paying him this amount of money, so maybe that money can be better allocated somewhere else. What is interesting to me is it looks to me like they've kind of gotten back to their roots and to their Riley roots in a certain sense. As you know, since Pat came, the idea has always been kind of you get two players, right? Now the big three was obviously different because there was a once in a lifetime that was the Big Bang, right? But you get two players and then you build around that core. Okay, so whether it was you got Zoe, and then you got Tim in that midseason trade, and then it was, okay, we can get Mashburn for Kurt Thomas, and maybe he can become the third piece, and we've got, these other guys that can kind of build around it, whether it was Marley, et cetera, and all the various veteran backup point guards that they had. We're going to build around that. Then it's you trade for Shaq, you give up Karan, you give up Brian, you give up Lamar, and then essentially, okay, how are we going to build a team around Shaq and Dwayne? It feels to me like they've gotten back to basics here. We have Bam. He's got a longer window. We have Jimmy. He's got a shorter window. We're going to try to build a team that fits Jimmy in this short window, and I think they feel they owe it to Jimmy at this point. And also, I know when they met with Jimmy initially that there were certain promises that were made about the way they were going to try to build a team, and this is consistent with it. And then Bam's window was longer, but essentially there may be two builds here, right? If it's Kyle Lowry is basically for Jimmy's window. And then
Right.
ultimately you're keeping flexibility because you're going to need somebody for Bam's window. But it does seem like they've gotten back to basics here where we're going to have our 2 stars and then we're going to build a team around them that fit them.
And here's the thing. Here's a name we haven't mentioned yet. Don't know if you're planning to get to or not, and that's Goran Dragic.
Yes.
And Goran was originally mentioned by people who simply wanted to find money to match in many of these deals, but really has not been a prime name thrown out there. He's another Jimmy name. So you sort of can keep your 30-plus group together. And again, I've continued to contend that 35 is the new 30 in the NBA with training methods and the way the Heat work with teams. So think about that. You could have Lowry and Goran and Jimmy in the 30s playing for the next season or 2 or however long if Jimmy gets an extension, and still have your youth core behind that, depending on who's traded or not, out of Duncan, out of Precious, out of Kendrick, and, of course, still having Bam and Tyler there, and get the best of all worlds. So that's why so many of these deals make sense, because you can cover yourself for now and for the future, and also cover yourself when people are so worried the Heat don't have any draft choices. The Heat do. The Heat's draft choices, unless they get freed up from that trade from Oklahoma City, still 2 of those 3 will belong to them. Whether 23, 24, or 25 go to the Thunder, the other 2 will go to the Heat. There will be 2 first-round picks available to the Heat there. So, again, that's another growth mechanism for this team. So I think the Heat are trying to have it both ways. I think it's really smart. But it comes down to one thing, and Bam used the quote the other day also, and I hate it. I hate this whole notion of winning or misery.
Right.
I think there's a very nice place in between, where if you win a couple of rounds in the playoffs, and you make some noise and you get some notice, that's a really good thing also. So I think the Heat can position themselves for that. I think they can win a first-round series this year. I think depending on the matchup, especially if it's Milwaukee or maybe Philadelphia, they can make noise in the second round this year and still build for the future and maintain their assets. So I think there's a real interesting duality in place for the Heat.
We're going to talk about the draft picks in a second because I want us to explain to everybody what all that means, because I don't think people understand the unprotected, the protecting the picks with OKC, et cetera. And it does appear to make the Lowry deal, they're going to need to come up with a pick. That's what I've been hearing, that essentially they got to come up with a pick somewhere, even if it means trading somewhere else. But
and it could be just as simple as moving a player for a pick rather than putting up at a cost with Oklahoma City.
Absolutely, right. So there are 2 options. So we're going to get to that after the break. But we're talking about Jimmy here. And I'm wondering if they are in some ways, because, again, with the Heat, there's so much of a history, and it's the same people, and it's why I enjoy covering them, because you can kind of follow what they did before, and it gives you a blueprint for what they may do in the future. There was regret in the organization that at least until 2010, when, again, the Big Bang, that they sort of wasted Dwayne's prime, right? And I know Jimmy's older than Dwayne was at that stage, but Dwayne had 2 of the great individual, maybe the two of the best individual seasons in Heat history for sure. And 08-09 is one of the best seasons in the past 25 years that anybody's had. And they couldn't do anything with it. I feel like those lessons are now being applied with Jimmy. It's like I understand he's older than Dwayne, and so there's even more of a premium to kind of get this done. But the idea is we're not going to waste Jimmy's prime here. How much of that do you think is playing it? Because they're going after his best friend. And like you said, they're going to keep Goran, who is his other best friend in the league now. And it's like we're going to build a team that's going to make Jimmy happy on a daily basis.
And they're also possibly keeping Tyler Hero if the other deals aren't made, who's another Jimmy best friend. So I think there's a lot in play there, because the one thing we know about Jimmy, I mean, you know what? You didn't have to keep Dwayne as happy, and I almost feel this worked against Dwayne because Dwayne was so humble.
Yeah.
He was always the humble star. He went along with anything, even when he looked around and realized his teammates were Stefan Lasme and Kasip Powell. He was the good soldier. Jimmy is not that, and he made that clear from the get-go, and he made that clear in Chicago. He made that clear in Minnesota. He made that clear in Philadelphia, is he wants his pieces and his way. So I think from the moment that he made that trade and gave up Josh Richardson and gave up the first-round pick and made the moves with Leonard and with Hassan Whiteside, they realized to keep Jimmy happy is to keep Jimmy efficient. So I don't know if Jimmy's sitting right now at 601 Biscayne with Andy and Pat, but I think Jimmy's in every consideration they do, probably even more so than Bam. Yeah. Bam's locked into the 5-year deal. He's sort of, he's it. He's going to be it for 5 years. But you got to keep Jimmy happy, because you and I have both seen unhappy Jimmy, and it's kind of ugly.
Yeah, it is, and that extension's going to be, look, That extension is going to be discussed this summer for sure, this offseason, and you want Jimmy locked in. I mean, the way that Jimmy's played, he's playing at an MVP level, there's no question. We're going to talk about the first-round picks and explain that to everyone because I do think that's going to be a big factor here. They got to find a first-rounder somewhere, I think, to get this deal done with Toronto. So if it's not theirs or it's not unprotecting the Oklahoma City picks, it's got to be getting it from somewhere else. Back with Ira in a second. Onside Radio enters Kai's Corner with Kai Chen Chisholm every day. See, I learned how to pronounce it now that I'm not here every day. Every day from 10 a.m. to noon, join Kai as he discusses the biggest stories in South Florida sports. Every day, 10 to noon, Kai's Corner, the home for sports talk in South Florida, OnsideRadio.com.
Now streaming online.
Onside Radio, the only choice for the South Florida sports fan.
There are those who dedicate themselves to a sense of honor, to a life of courage, and a commitment to something greater than themselves. They have always defended this nation and each other. They still do. The few, the proud, the Marines.
With Make-A-Wish, the impossible becomes possible. A girl battling cancer can become a race car driver battling the course. The boy showing all the nurses his fire trucks can take the helm of a real one. Wishes can give kids with critical illnesses the strength to keep fighting, get better, and grow up.
Where there's a wish, there's a way.
Wishes need you. Visit Make-A-Wish at wish.org.
Get the brutal honesty every weekday noon to 3 p.m. with a Big O and the Onside Zone on your home for sports talk in South Florida. OnsideRadio.com.
A message to help keep you safe. If doctors told us today that we'd made a breakthrough on COVID-19, saving thousands of lives, we would rejoice. Finally, a good news day. We'd feel less afraid that our loved ones would be struck by the invisible enemy. We'd start to feel hope that we could live our lives again. Well, a mask does all that. We can help protect others by covering our noses and mouths, which is how the virus mainly spreads. Masks are a ticket to freedom, to be out in the world, to getting together, back to work, back to doing what we want. If doctors announced we could save lives today, we would grab that breakthrough with both hands. While we wait for a vaccine, grab the breakthrough that's already here. When we're out, it's masks on.
Brought to you by the Ad Council. Every 2 minutes, a woman in the U.S. is diagnosed with breast cancer. And in that split second, her life changes forever. The toll of breast cancer is great. The need to support those who are battling the disease today is even greater. We're fighting alongside patients because we know one moment can change a lifetime. United by hope, we can end breast cancer. Join our fight. Save lives.
Keeping you informed in the world of sports. With an OnsideRadio.com sports update.
Still no trade news to report for the Miami Heat as the NBA trade deadline is today at 3 p.m. Eastern. Miami back on the court tonight. They take on the Trailblazers. They try to end their 4-game losing streak. That tip-off set to at 7:30 at the AAA. Florida Panthers, they're also in action tonight in Chicago against the Blackhawks at 8 p.m. Florida's lost the last 2 games. This is South Florida's new choice for local sports talk. This is OnsideRadio.com. Coming up, more Inside the Paint with Ethan Skolnick and Ira Winderman right here. OnsideRadio.com.
time for the hardcore basketball talk you crave. OnSideRadio.com presents Inside the Paint with Ethan Skolnick and Ira Winderman. To reach out to the guys, dial 888-441-4623. It's a flagrant foul if you're driving. Be safe, basketball fans. 844-416-8123. That's 844-416-8123. There's more to this game than just the score. So let's go inside the paint with two of the best in the business, Ethan Skolnick and Ira Winderman.
All right, Ethan Skolnick back on OnSideRadio.com for Inside the Paint with Ira Winderman. Let's get right to it. It's our belief, our reporting, is basically that they're trying to find a first-round pick to expand this deal. And they're still talking to Toronto, obviously, to try to get Lowry.
Right.
Let's get into the whole first-round pick thing for people who don't get it, okay? Because can be a little bit confusing. All right, so can you do this stuff better than I do? Explain the Oklahoma City situation and why this potentially could matter. It's not, like you said, it's not 100% necessary, but and why the other thing I've heard is Oklahoma City's making it very difficult.
And why wouldn't they?
Exactly.
And that's what people don't understand. Basically, there's two factors in play. The first is called the Ted Stepien rule, and it's named after the former Cleveland Cavaliers owner who thought the greatest thing in the world was just to trade all of his first-round picks as many years out as possible for some of the worst possible players in NBA history, including the pick that became James Worthy for the Los Angeles Lakers. And the NBA at the time realized that Ted Stepien was not only doing that, but doing that because he planned to eventually sell the team and really didn't care who the new owners wound up with when it came to first-round draft choices. So he emptied the cupboard. So the league said the new rule would be this. You cannot trade out consecutive first-round picks in future years. In other words, if your 2021 is due to a team, you cannot trade your 2022. That way, a team would at least know that it's getting a first-round pick every other year. Mm-hmm. If the team is sold to another owner, that owner wouldn't come in and have no picks. So when the Heat made the Goran Dragic trade in 2015 with the Phoenix Suns, they traded two picks to the Suns. One was a pick that already has been excised, that was moved around the league a couple of times, actually wound up with Philadelphia and then Phoenix. The other was the 2023 first-round draft choice. I hope I'm getting this right. The 2023 draft choice, and this pick came from the fact that the Heat protected the pick. I think it's first 10, Ethan. Am I correct on that?
Yes, that's correct. It's first 10.
It's first 10. So what the Heat did is they put protections on 2023, 2024, and 2025. That if the pick is in the top 10, the Heat keep it, in case it's an elite player, and it would roll out further. Actually, I think this pick actually came from the Myers-Leonard trade and through the Clippers also, because there were also a couple of other picks they moved. But be that as it may. So the Thunder hold the Heat first-round pick that is protected in 2023. If it is top 10, it becomes a Thunder first-round pick protected in 2024 and rolls out from there. That means because the Heat don't know what year that first-round pick is going to be extended, they can't touch any of the previous or future years around that. And all of a sudden, the Heat don't have a first-round pick to trade until 2027 because they don't know about the protections. In hindsight, if the Heat would have made it unprotected, fine. You get the pick in 2023. We can't trade our pick in 24 because that would be consecutive years going out, but they could in 25 or 26. Well, with the pick protected, they can't do that because they don't know what year they're trading the pick.
Was that a mistake? Let me ask you this, because typically most organizations would want to protect the pick, but in the Heat's case, they never think they're going to be in the lottery. So that one always – it feels like the right decision at the time that has made things a little bit more challenging now. Is that a correct way to assess it?
Yeah, and then the fact is – maybe the one protection the Heat should have made is knowing that they deal a lot of first-round picks.
Right.
And that they tend to look at first-round picks more as currency than as capital to actually select a player. I mean, you remember Pat Riley was sitting with us at a press conference, and he basically said, if I get a first-round pick every other year, I'm happy. I don't have time to sit down and keep developing these players like we're seeing the rawness of Precious Achiuwa right now. I want to go out and have, ready-to-go NBA veterans. But the notion now, Ethan, that the Heat can go to the Thunder and going, hey, good luck, guys. We're going to give it to you unprotected. Let's take the protections off. If we wind up with the number one pick in 2023, you can have it. But Sam Presti, the GM of the Thunder, is a smart guy. And he realizes why the Heat would be so magnanimous. Because the Heat need to be. Because they need to unlock future picks. So he's going to want something else. And even if it's something as small as a second-round pick, well, the Heat really don't have second-round picks. They, matter of fact, just last week traded one to Sam Presti in order to get Trevor Ariza in the Myers-Leonard deal. So I don't even know capital-wise, Ethan, if the Thunder play hardball, I don't know what the Heat would give them other than a tangible asset. And all of a sudden, if you're saying, we'll give you Kendrick Nunn to unlock, that's a lot to give up just to get out of that. So I don't know if the Heat can work around that. I don't know, and I don't think the Heat can get a first-round pick through that avenue. But I think they can get a first-round pick by perhaps moving someone on their roster right now to a team who will at least give them a protected pick, and maybe that's the ultimate play.
And again, the problem is the Heat have so many dead roster spots that, as you and I have discussed, players they can't get picks for. Like, who's giving you a second-round pick for Mo Harkless, right? Like, who's getting there are other teams that there's enough depth beyond, say, their top 8 or top 9 that they could trade a serviceable veteran player for a second-round pick. If the Heat had more serviceable veterans on their bench, they wouldn't be so desperate to make a deal right now. I mean, part of the problem is the depth has not really been the depth. And so again, I think you've hit on it because we characterize it as, oh, they'll go to OKC, and OKC will do this, and maybe you'll even get George Hill or somebody like that in the deal. Right. That's not going to happen. And we also know there are certain general managers in the league that you want to make a deal with because you're probably going to win the deal. Pretty much any general manager Sacramento has had for the past 15 years.
Right.
Sam Presti is not. Sam Presti and Masai Ujiri and Daryl Morey, some of the GMs who were involved in all this stuff, are not the GMs you get over on. Okay,
right, and they're all trying to win, and they're all looking out for their own interest. And there's not, I've even heard with the LaMarcus Aldridge buyout thing, and how Greg Popovich is such a fan of Pat Riley, and that if Aldridge winds up, getting a buyout, that the two of them, might work something out, and at least he'll get them to the Heat. No, if Greg Popovich can trade LaMarcus Aldridge today for any asset in return and get off any of that money for LaMarcus Aldridge, he's going to do this. This isn't, a friendship circle. This is a matter of everyone looking out for their own interests. The Heat got themselves into a pickle because of the Thunder pick. They have to work around that. But the one lesson I've learned, whether it's about this pick and sort of getting around it, or not having enough salary cap space in the offseason, and you know this, Ethan, the Jimmy Butler episode taught us a lesson.
Yep.
When you get Jimmy Butler without any cap space, there's always a way. What's that Pat quote? You were there for it. There's no roadblocks.
No. There are obstacles, but there are none. We have a T-shirt to that effect, actually, which I've been promoting to. There are obstacles, but there are none. In fact, Spoelstra told me that was his favorite Riley expression because it didn't really make any sense.
Yeah.
But, right?
But you know what's funny? It didn't make any sense, but it made all the sense in the world.
Exactly.
And it's like you mentioned at the top of the show with Andy Ellisberg. Pat basically puts Andy Ellisberg in these absolutely untenable situations and then says, here's a pad, here's a pencil, make it work. And the remarkable thing is, and I always tell people about this with Andy, is Andy always makes it work. And you should always have Andy Ellisberg do your taxes for you because he will maximize your refund. I don't know how Andy does it, but they always find a way. And this, too, they will find a way if they need to secure a first-round pick.
Well, yeah, Andy Ellisberg with a calculator should be a reality show. And I don't think people understand the Jimmy Butler trade. I'm not talking about the one with Minnesota where, Tibbs and Riley hung up the phone. I'm talking about the one that actually ended up happening. How many times that thing almost broke down? And it's not just the part that people know about, which is the Dragic thing, and we misheard if it was Dragic or it was Olynyk or Derek Jones Jr.
To the Mavericks, right?
Yeah, there were other elements to that trade that nearly broke down, and essentially Andy saved that thing in 15 minutes. And it's not – that's the other thing about this. It's not just the money that he's got to figure out, but – he's also doing a lot of the communicating with the other general managers around the league. And we talk about the Dwayne Wade thing and how he ended up back here in Miami. Basically, it was just him and Kobe Altman going through their rosters, which is why when everybody says, well, the Heat are talking to this team, I'm like, who are they not talking to at every minute of the freaking day?
Thank you. And so every name is going to come up because you do your due diligence. And here's another very important factor as we count down toward 3 o'clock today, people. don't look at it as 3 o'clock. It's never just 3 o'clock. If you are in the midst of a negotiation, the NBA always grants latitude for teams to get deals done. That's just the way it is. So I would almost guarantee, Ethan, that more deals will be confirmed at 4 o'clock than at 3 o'clock. That's just the way it is. Don't look at the deadline as a hard finish line. What it is the league saying is, are you engaged in negotiations right now with another team toward an end, and they will give them some leeway. And so that's what happens. This stuff isn't even all about the 11th hour. It really is about the 12th hour.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think this is end up being an active deadline, but late. I think that there were so many things, and everybody's sort of waiting on the Lowry and Aaron Gordon shoes to drop now. And then I do think there'll be some activity that comes right after that. Because I also think, and I want to talk to you about this after, two things. One, I want to talk about Lowry fit with you after the break, but also there is always a surprise player. Last year during the deadline, like, we knew about Iguodala and Crowder. The Gallinari thing kind of just snuck in there and was almost the key part to the whole damn deal. I want to talk about maybe who might be the guy out there that the Heat might end up. We've heard Dinwiddie's name recently.
Interesting. I have 3 names on my list I was going to talk to you about that. I'm glad you brought that up. So after the break, I'll also give you league-wide, I think, 3 names that might jump back out there that we haven't been considering as much. Absolutely.
Very good. All right, back with Ira on Inside the Paint in a second. Sundays at 9 a.m., Juan Cardona dominates the airwaves with One-on-One. From sneakers to video games to your favorite South Florida teams, tune in every Sunday to One-on-One exclusively on the home for sports talk in South Florida, OnSideRadio.com.
You can send them a text at 844-416-8123. That's 844-416-8123.
On the battlefield, there's a saying America's military men and women live by. Never leave a fallen warrior behind, ever. Off the battlefield, Wounded Warrior Project operates with the same goal. Wounded Warrior Project was created to help our men and women returning home with the scars of war, whether those scars are physical or mental. Wounded Warrior Project. We never leave a fallen warrior behind, ever. Learn more about what we do at woundedwarriorproject.org.
If you missed Onside Zone with Big O, you missed.
She's kind of young, so I don't know. She may not be into Van Halen much. Let's see. Hey, Ruthie, good afternoon. Are you a Van Halen fan?
You know, I just had to Google Van Halen. I'm not going to lie to you. I just literally have it on my computer right now.
The Onside Zone with Big O. Weekdays 11 to 1 p.m. Only on OnSideRadio.com.
These are unprecedented times. Challenging how the YMCA works to strengthen community as we have for nearly 170 years. But we've always found ways to help people and communities in times of crisis. Right now, Ys across the country are providing emergency childcare, shelter, food programs, and outreach to seniors. But we can't do it alone. Whether you're connected to the Y or have a fond Y memory, we need you to stay with us. Reach out to your local Y today and stay with us for a better us.
Time for the hardcore basketball talk you crave. OnSideRadio.com presents Inside the Paint with Ethan Skolnick and Ira Winderman. To reach out to the guys, dial 888-441-4623. It's a flagrant foul if you're driving. Be safe, basketball fans. 844-416-8123. That's 844-416-8123. There's more to this game than just the score. So let's go inside the paint with 2 of the best in the business, Ethan Skolnick and Ira Winderman.
All right, Ethan Skolnick back on Inside the Paint. Kyle be in here at 11 o'clock. All right, let's get right to it. I want to talk Lowry fit here before we close, but before we do that, surprise names. We mentioned there's always guys, even the Kelly Olynyk thing in free agency was like, okay, the Heat didn't get Hayward, so Boston got Hayward, so Boston was clearing space with Olynyk, and all of a sudden the Heat are signing a player I never thought would be a player that they would sign. He didn't seem to me in any way that he fit kind of the Riley mold, maybe more the Spo mold, and now Kelly's been here 4 years. Saw Gallinari last year at the deadline, who almost happened if they just agreed on the damn extension. I think in the way the Heat sort of dodged a bullet there, in my view.
Yeah, we saw what he looked like when he came here with the Hawks.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I think that he dodged a bullet twice, actually. All right, but who are the surprise guys? Who we come out? Oh my God, we weren't talking about the Heat getting
Well,
that guy.
I know there's one guy who's been mentioned, then unmentioned, then taken off the market. But Ethan, as long as I see Orlando throwing out so many players out there, like Aaron Gordon, who I think will be dealt today, like Evan Fournier, who I believe will be dealt today, I think Nikola Vucevic is not out of the question. Because if you're doing a hard rebuild and you're waiting for Jonathan Isaacs to come back next season, and you're hoping to get more out of your young players when Markelle Fultz comes back next season, I don't think that's out of the picture. I think one name that will at least come back out today, if not be dealt, is, let's face it, the way the Wizards are completely out of the playoffs now, and Bradley Beal has said all the right things, but I can't see Bradley Beal being anything but miserable this offseason when 10 teams in the East make the playoffs or the play-in, and his team isn't one of them. I think teams are at least calling again to Washington and trying to reason with them that it's over for you guys. How about some young talent, Tyler Hero, and move on from there. I think teams at least engage the Wizards today with Bradley Beal. The other one is one of those awful contracts that makes no sense except if maybe you have awful contracts, which I don't think the Heat have. But I think Kevin Love at some point needs to get relocated, whether it's a buyout or otherwise, from the Cavaliers, because everything the Cavaliers are doing is youth-based. He doesn't fit right there now. He still can rebound. He still can shoot. He has an awful contract. He has an injury history. But I think that's the kind of trade which is going to be like the Westbrook-John Wall trade, where we'll give you our bad for your bad and see if it can work out a little bit more. So I think there are some real names that at least get discussed today, if not moved. And what always happens is this. We're going to have one of those to be continued, because any older player who is not dealt today, we now have the April 9th buyout deadline. You must get bought out by then in order to be eligible for another team's playoff roster. So I think the Heat and other teams will then move on to Part B.
Interesting you mentioned Vucevic, because that was going to be my first name too. And so let me throw this at you. We know that Tyler Hero has not been included in the trade to Toronto. He's not in the offers. We talked earlier in the show about why that kind of got out there. I don't believe there's any chance he'll be traded to Toronto. I do think he could be traded, though. I do think he could be traded, and one of the places I think he could be traded is Orlando in a deal that for someone like Vucevic. As you know, and we've talked about this, the Heat always go after the same guys over and over and over again. Yeah. There's a list, okay? And Kyle Lowry, by the way, is one of those, because in 2014, before LeBron left, a lot of the conversation was, could you get Kyle Lowry down here on a 4-year deal? And he ended up signing in Toronto. In fact, there were some who thought that there were false reports even. I remember one in specifically, okay, about how Lowry was going to end up here in something for Bosch or something along those lines, okay? So Lowry's name has been out there, but Vucevic has been a Heat target, and not just a Heat killer. He's been a Heat target for years. He was a Heat target when he was in Philadelphia. They liked him before he came down to Orlando. So could you see a scenario where Tyler Hero, it sounds like you could, is traded? It's just not in this Lowry deal.
Yeah, well, again, I think if Tyler Hero is traded, it's in a Victor Oladipo deal. So I definitely have Tyler Hero on the list of those who might not be there tonight for the Heat against the Portland Trail Blazers at American Airlines Arena in national TV. And why the heck they schedule games on trade deadline day. Bad. I'll never know when teams have to cobble together rosters, especially when you already have guys out due to protocols. But yeah, and again, the Tyler thing, and we could go another hour on this alone, comes down to what will Tyler Hero be. If you believe Tyler Hero will be a rotation starter for his career, you might pull back. If you believe Tyler Hero will be an instant offense spark off your bench, which is fine also, then I think you're more likely to make that move. So is Tyler Hero Vinnie Johnson? Is Tyler Hero Lou Williams? Or is Tyler Hero closer to Victor Oladipo, closer to a starting NBA quality guard? I think that's where you go from there when it comes to Tyler Hero. Tough to make that decision at 21 years old, but you know what? The Heat always live on the clock. That's how the Heat operate. So I think that's the decision they have to make. Just like with Duncan Robinson. Is he solely a shooter? Is he your Jason Capono? Is he your James Jones? Is he a guy who does one thing well? But you know what? We'll find the next guy who does one thing well.
Yeah, no doubt. And you mentioned this on Tyler. I actually think the level is higher. The question I would be asking is, if you're not going to include him in any deals, the question I would be asking is, Can he be your third best player on a championship contender like within the next year? And can he ultimately be one of your top 2 players once Jimmy starts to recede a little bit? And I think the answer to that is probably no. And so
way too erratic right now. I mean, there was a stat out there for players who make as many three-pointers as he does per game. He has like the lowest three-point percentage among those players this season. So, you ride the wild swings, which is fine as a sixth man, as a reserve, but not as a guy you're trying to roll out there 82 games a season as a starter.
All right, last one, and we've literally got 30 seconds because Sean's doing the little signal thing with me. Kyle Lowry, the fit here in Miami with Jimmy and Bam from a basketball perspective. Do you like it? Does he solve a lot of the problems they've had this year?
He does, because he's a two-way player, so now you're not rolling out the Tyler Heroes and the Goran Dragic's and say score, and then we'll hope and pray on the other end. But he doesn't solve all the problems because there's still a big hole at power forward, especially if Kelly Olynyk goes out then and Precious Achiuwa goes out with him. Then all of a sudden it's like, come on down again, Mo Harkless, at least till, LaMarcus Aldridge or someone else arrives. So, yes, a huge help at the moment, and there still will be a major gap in this overall rotation of power forward, and I'm not so sure that answer comes today. I think there's a chance that answer comes at the buyout deadline.
Get to know Chris Silva, everybody. All right, Inside the Paint with Ira Winderman. We're here every Thursday. Probably be back at the 10:30 spot. Kai is in here next. Ira, thank you for doing it. Follow him at Ira Heatbeat. Obviously, follow him all day long. I'm going home to immerse myself in this for the next 8 hours. You can follow me at 5 Reasons Sports on your home for sports talk in South Florida, OnSideRadio.com.
Hey, is that a faucet running?